You know, I'm starting to think that the worst enemy and ally of the bell pepper industry is toy animation. Cold opener for this one featured Ompu fantasizing about crepes, waffles, and takoyaki.
One of these things is not like the other.
I mean, okay, the little octopus puffs are actually made with a variant of pancake batter, much like the other two, but they are also considered a little less fancy, unless they're made by Homer. The episode proper opened with the Ojamajo checking on their seed plants, so yeah, these were a thing, weren't they? And yet, surprisingly, and kind of nonsensically, in spite of what happened back in episode 18, Doremi's plant wasn't the least developed, but rather Aiko's. Ompu, kind of sensibly, ended up pointing this out, leading to the two fighting?
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I mean, yeah, Aiko was a little ticked that she was also the one taking care of Ompu's plant when she wasn't around, which is going to be a running theme throughout this episode, but I don't know, it just feels like they're kind of rushing into this main conflict of the episode. Like, at the very least, this could have been an escalating issue with them progressively adding to the fire. Not like that! Anyway, the next day, things were still a little awkward to say the least between the two. This did lead to some interesting discussions about the contrasting personality traits between the two Ojamajo and why they couldn't get along as a result. Even though that hasn't really been a thing throughout this series, aside from Ompu's intro arc where everyone was against her as she was the antagonist of that arc. On that note, the episode briefly became a clip show where they recollected those events and how she worked with Masaruka and Hehe at the time. Oh yeah, whatever happened to those two? Oh, right. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in regards to why allegedly Heihe's VA retired from the industry that we're in no position to talk about on this little YouTube channel, so you can look it up for yourself. To just keep things focused on this little magical girl show, we'll just say that the likely reason Masaruka hasn't made any significant appearances since her non-speaking role in the first episode of this season was because Heihe was Thanos snapped away due to her VA retiring. Without a supporting character to work off of, the Toad just could make a lot of appearances in the show, including in this very episode, where she could have cameoed to talk about her past with Ompu, instead of them just using this mini clip show to exposit about it. It actually would have been interesting to have her appear in this episode, even without Heihe, to give a little more perspective, but I guess sometimes real life gets in the way. Anyway, being reminded of Season 1 Ompu only ended up upsetting Aiko more. This issue was only further aggravated by Hana of all characters, when she managed to eat by herself, and Ompu, who again was busy with her idol work, just barely missed it, which Aiko only offhandedly pointed out.
Get a life, kid!
Again, I get that sometimes friends will argue over the smallest of things. I mean, I think we've all been there at some point. But even then, this feels like they're making mountains out of anthills with these arguments. I don't know, this just all feels a little too melodramatic to the point it doesn't really work with me. Like, they also revealed another reason Ompu was late was because she had bought cakes for everyone, likely as an apology to Aiko, and yet just an offhanded comment from her ended up upsetting her to the point that she abandoned her apology. This isn't really making me feel bad for either character when it feels like they're just needlessly perpetuating this conflict. Anyway, the next day, inspired by a note her dad had left for her after they had a fight that was totally his fault, like, dude, you're a grown man, don't bitch about your daughter's cooking, Aiko figured the Ojamajo could start exchanging a notebook to share their days with each other without the complication of actually talking to each other getting in the way. It makes sense, as we have even seen in this very episode, sometimes verbal tics and tones can end up triggering people, so adding at least a little bit of a formality like this can soften communication down to friendlier terms. And as long as they don't have any sort of anonymity, it shouldn't really be all that toxic. Am I right, Twitter? I mean, X. That's gonna get some getting used to. Anyway, as a result, Aiko managed to even apologize for their previous arguments. Personally, I don't think she needs to apologize for the cake incident, but whatever. This was sure to resolve their little conflict, with Ompu sharing her own thoughts with her friends and... Okay, so did they actually time travel and replace Sharp Ompu with Season 1 Ompu? Because that's kind of what this feels like. Actually, let's just put a pin in that for now. Again, this conflict just doesn't ring organically when the characters are given so many opportunities to just resolve it, and yet they take none of them. As a result, the original trio decided that the only way to resolve things would be by spying on their friend.
That makes sense to me.
So they turned into cats outside of Ompu's house, hoping that she'd take them with her to her next job. Huh. Probably should have shown her the opening to Oliver and Company. Seriously, that thing was so damn sad. Nah, of course, she circled back to pick them up, with seemingly no objection from her mom, who should know that most studios wouldn't allow pets. Then again, for some reason they had cat food brand cat food there. I don't know, maybe they're a major sponsor or something. Anyway, as a result, she did reveal her true feelings to the Ojamajo cats, including how she did want to apologize to Aiko, but it all just became too awkward. So again, I asked, why not just use the notebook as it removes a lot of those formalities? You did consider her feelings. Omp was the one who's not meeting you halfway by writing down in the notebook, "I'm sorry, Aiko." Anyway, the Ojamajo escaped and ended up revealing themselves to Ompu, and okay, to be fair, she did have every right to be upset with them here, which ultimately just kind of makes everyone in this episode kind of unlikable. Eventually, we reach the subject of that cold opener and the episode's title, with Aiko inviting Ompu to a takoyaki party she was hosting. However, she no-showed, and after I'm guessing at least a few hours of waiting, Ompu finally sent them the notebook through their magical phones. Imagine that, sending messages through your phone. I'm sure that'll never catch on. But yeah, she finally wrote in the notebook and apologized and told them that she had to cover for a co-worker at the last minute. And yeah, while this is supposed to be the big emotional moment of the episode where she let out all of her feelings, this conflict has been stretched out way too thin for me to care at this point. The only thing that kind of caught my attention was the admittedly kind of clever way they managed to get Ompu to join in on the party by using the same kind of spell she just used to send the notebook, and sent Aiko directly to her dressing room to cook the takoyaki for her. It's an interesting new mechanic that builds on the abilities of the Ojamajo. Anyway, the episode ended with the two learning how playful banter works when they want to take non-toxic jabs at one another, and Aiko's plan finally sprouted. This episode felt like a play of takoyaki without any taco in the middle. Just a whole lot of nothing that tries to cover up its lack of substance with sauces, or in this case, conflicts that just don't feel well put together. I think we've all fought with a friend at some point, but I doubt it was ever this needlessly melodramatic. The funny thing about this episode is that it might have worked if it had been a season 1 episode, specifically near the finale. Hell, with all of those references to Masaruka, it might have well been the case that this was a script that was left on the cutting room floor and then dusted off when this series got an unexpected sequel. Obviously, the biggest issue here is that a lot of things have changed since the season 1 finale. Ompu was on much friendlier terms with the original trio by this point, so Aiko snapping at her out of nowhere felt unearned and rushed. In turn, Ompu also snapping and not apologizing felt equally forced. Like, I get that kids fight over stupid things all the time, but I don't remember these two specifically having this much of a bad relationship, and they really shouldn't after the literal life or death situation they went through. It's a weak conflict that just makes both of them look worse by the end. And thus, overall, this episode was just kind of pointless other than establishing a kind of new interesting trick for their phones. Other than that, though, I certainly ain't RSVPing for this party. I think I'll just go buy some frozen takoyaki instead. Unless anything major comes up, I think we'll just go back to finishing up the last part of the Futai reviews. And while that third quarter certainly had its issues, I think I'll at least have a few more positive things to say about the climax to the OG series. Look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and oh, would you look at that, another consumer survey. You know, one of these days, would it be nice if we could just put our whole hands right into our phones to the other side?